My wife suggested an open marriage to improve our relationship, or so she said. You'll be surprised when you find out what was really behind this decision. Let me start from the beginning. I walked through the front door expecting the usual quiet Tuesday night. Work had been its typical grind. Emails, a quick lunch at my desk, poring over blueprints, and then traffic all the way home. I was ready for the comfort of our normal evening routine. Dinner, a little TV, maybe chatting about the weekend. Instead, the air felt staged. The table was set like we were expecting company. Real plates, cloth napkins, candles lit. Claire sat already waiting, her hair curled, wearing the deep blue dress she usually saved for weddings. She smiled when she saw me, but it wasn't the natural kind. It was the kind you hold for a camera, just long enough to click. Wow, I said, hanging my jacket. What's the occasion? No occasion, she said lightly, motioning for me to sit. Just thought it would be nice. That was my first red flag. Claire enjoys a cozy meal as much as anyone, but she's never been the formal dinner on a Tuesday type. I sat, serving myself chicken and vegetables while she kept her eyes fixed on me, almost studying my face. Halfway through the meal, she set her fork down. So, she began, I've been reading a lot of relationship advice lately. I raised an eyebrow. Oh yeah? About what? She leaned back, tucking a curl behind her ear. You know, ways to keep things fresh. Exciting. She said the last word slowly, as if it were meant to carry more weight than it should. Fresh, I repeated, chewing slowly. Her lips curved into a too-perfect smile. One thing I've noticed coming up a lot is open marriage. Couples trying it to explore new sides of themselves. For personal growth. I set my fork down. Open marriage. Don't look at me like that, she said with a short laugh that sounded more like a line from a play. It's not as strange as it sounds. A lot of happy couples do it. I've read it can make relationships stronger. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the shift in the air. The Claire I knew had always been openly critical of people who cheated. Now here she was, selling the idea like it was a new fitness plan. Why now? I asked, keeping my voice calm. She shrugged. I just think, maybe we could both use some freedom. Space to grow. We've been together a long time. Wouldn't it be exciting to try something new? The word freedom echoed in my head. Not because I didn't understand it, but because she said it the way people do when they've already tasted it. How long have you been thinking about this? I asked. Not long, she replied quickly. Too quickly. Just came across it online and thought, why not? Her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't move to check it, but her eyes flickered in its direction, just for a fraction of a second, before snapping back to me. I noticed the screen was face down. We finished eating, but the conversation never returned to normal. Every time I spoke, she seemed half listening. Every time her phone buzzed again, she sat a little straighter. After dinner, I stood to clear the dishes. She lingered at the table, scrolling through her phone with her head tilted slightly, the corners of her mouth lifting into a faint, private smile. She didn't even notice I was watching. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about something she wanted to explore. It was about something she was already doing. The open marriage talk wasn't a suggestion. It was damage control, a way to make me accept something after the fact. But I didn't call her out. Not yet. Later, we sat on opposite ends of the couch. The TV was on, but neither of us was really watching. Her phone was in her hand, brightness turned low, her thumb moving in slow, deliberate swipes. I caught her smiling once, small, almost involuntary. I leaned back, kept my eyes on the screen, and thought about what she'd said. Freedom, personal growth, all dressed up as something for us, but already feeling like something she'd decided for herself. I didn't know exactly what she was hiding yet, but I knew this much. From tonight on, I'd be watching everything. The days after that dinner felt different in a way that's hard to explain. Nothing obvious, no arguments, no slammed doors, but there was a thin, invisible wall between us. It wasn't the kind of tension you can fix with small talk. It was the quiet, calculated kind, the type that grows when one person is hiding something and the other is pretending not to notice. Claire started coming home later than usual. At first, she'd text something harmless, running errands, or meeting a friend from work, but she never mentioned these friends before. And when I'd ask about them later, her answers were vague, like she was picking details out of thin air. She also started dressing differently. Not drastically, but enough that I noticed. Nicer clothes, even for quick trips out. A little more makeup. hairstyled instead of tossed into her usual messy bun. And it wasn't just the effort, it was the timing. She'd get ready to grab coffee or meet a friend, but when we'd go out together, she'd barely put in the same care. Her phone became a fixture in her hand. She'd carry it from room to room, never leaving it unattended. If she got a message, she'd glance at it quickly and either smile to herself or swipe it away without saying a word. Once, while she was cooking, I noticed her phone light up on the counter. She turned it face down without even checking it, like she already knew who it was and didn't want me to see. She still brought up the open marriage idea, slipping it into conversations at odd times, while folding laundry in the car on the way to the store. Always with the same script. A lot of happy couples do it. It's healthy. We'd make our own rules. I'd respond with a non-committal maybe or we'll see and change the subject. I wasn't ready to give her a real answer. I was still testing how far she'd push. One evening, I came home and found her on the couch, dressed like she'd just stepped out of a magazine. She was scrolling on her phone with that faint smile again. She looked up quickly when she heard me, locking the screen. "Hey," she said casually. "I'm going to dinner with Emily tomorrow. You remember her, right?" I nodded, but the truth was I didn't. She'd never mentioned an Emily before. I asked where they were going. She told me some trendy spot downtown, the kind of place we'd only go to for special occasions. The next night, she came home late, nearly midnight. She didn't smell like alcohol or food, but there was something faint in the air, like cologne. Not mine. When I asked if dinner was good, she said, "Oh yeah, Emily and I had a great time," then disappeared into the bedroom before I could ask anything else. I lay awake for a long time that night. My gut was screaming, but my head kept telling me to wait. I didn't want to accuse her without proof. If she was doing what I thought she was doing, she'd eventually slip. And when she did, I wanted it to be undeniable. The next few days, I noticed more changes. She started going to the gym more often, something she hadn't done in years. She'd come back energized, glowing, and immediately jump in the shower. Once, I joked about joining her for a workout, and she laughed a little too hard before saying, "You'd hate my gym. It's all cardio classes." Each small detail by itself was nothing, but together, they formed a picture I didn't like. I started keeping mental notes, times she left, the excuses she gave, how she reacted when I asked about her plans. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was an observer, waiting for the truth to step out from behind the curtain. And deep down, I knew it wouldn't be long. It happened on a Thursday night. She'd texted earlier saying she was working late, which wasn't unusual lately. By now, working late had become one of those phrases that didn't mean what it used to. Still, I played along, made myself dinner, and let the TV run in the background until I heard the garage door rumble open. Claire walked in wearing the same outfit she'd left in that morning, a fitted cream blouse and dark jeans, but her hair was a little mussed, and she had a faint, unfamiliar scent clinging to her. Not her perfume. This was heavier, warmer, musky, like the kind of cologne that lingers after someone's been standing far too close. I didn't say anything at first, just asked, "Long night?" She set her purse down a little too quickly. "Yeah, you know how it is." The words were casual, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. I let a beat pass, then said, "You smell different." Her head tilted slightly, just enough for me to notice a flicker of thought before she smiled. "Oh, I hugged one of my coworkers goodbye. He wears way too much cologne." She delivered it smoothly, but her tone was light in the wrong way, almost rehearsed. She walked toward the bedroom without looking back, keeping her hands busy with her earrings. That was the first obvious lie. Later that night, I passed by the office and heard her voice, soft, lilting, almost sing-song. I slowed my steps, listening. She was giggling quietly, the kind of laugh you use when you're talking to someone you want to impress. I stayed just far enough down the hall so she wouldn't see me, catching a few fragments and whispers, nothing clear. But the tone was enough. It wasn't how you talk to a friend. When I stepped into the doorway, she jumped slightly and looked up. "Hey," she said quickly, covering the bottom of her phone with her hand. "Just talking to Emily." "Emily? Again? Late for a girl's chat, isn't it?" I asked. She rolled her eyes, like I was being unreasonable. "We're night owls. You know that." Then she turned back to her screen, ending the call a few seconds later with an overly casual, "Okay, bye." I went to bed that night with a certainty forming in my chest. The open marriage talk from a week ago wasn't curiosity, It was preparation. She wasn't floating an idea for the future. She was trying to make something she'd already done seem acceptable. Over the next few days, I started noticing more. She guarded her phone like it was holding state secrets. She'd angle the screen away from me even when she was just scrolling, and if it buzzed, she'd swipe it away almost immediately. Sometimes she'd smile faintly while reading, then glance at me as if checking whether I'd noticed. She kept bringing up the openness idea, like a salesperson circling back to a customer who hadn't said yes yet. Always with the same lines. It could be exciting. We'd have rules. We'd always be honest. The irony was almost insulting. I tested her once. When she said she was meeting Emily again, I smiled and asked if I could come along, just to grab a drink while they caught up. She didn't even think about it before laughing. It's just girl talk. You'd be bored out of your mind. She was out the door within minutes, dressed in something I'd never seen her wear to meet a friend. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces lined up. The cologne, the giggling phone calls, the guarded phone, the sudden push for an open marriage. None of it felt random. She wasn't testing the waters. She was already swimming in them. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I decided something. I wasn't going to ask her for the truth. I was going to catch it. And when I did, there would be no explanations, no twisting of words, no room for her to pretend it hadn't been what it clearly was. By the time the weekend rolled around, I'd had enough of the careful watching and silent note-taking. I didn't have hard proof yet, but the pattern was impossible to ignore. The late nights, the sudden wardrobe upgrades, the guarded phone, the new friends I'd never met. It was all pointing in one direction. I wasn't going to let it fester for another week. Saturday night felt like the right time. We'd both been home all day, drifting around each other like polite strangers. She'd spent the morning catching up on messages in the sunroom, phone never more than an inch from her hand, while I busied myself in the garage pretending to reorganize tools I hadn't used in months. When I walked into the living room that evening, she was curled up on the couch in leggings and a loose sweater, scrolling her phone with the kind of faint smile that never seemed to show up when she was looking at me. "Claire," I said, my voice steady. "Is there someone else?" She froze for half a beat, just enough for me to notice, before lifting her eyes to mine. Then came the laugh. Soft, quick, like she wanted to make my question sound absurd. "What? No. Where's that coming from?" I sat on the edge of the armchair opposite her. "You've been different lately," I said evenly. "Coming home late. Dressing up to meet friends I've never heard of. Talking about open marriage out of nowhere. It makes me wonder." She exhaled sharply through her nose, leaning back against the cushions. "You're being paranoid. I'm trying to keep things interesting between us, and you're turning it into some big conspiracy." I didn't bite. I just looked at her, letting the silence hang until she started talking again. "I told you, open marriage is a real thing," she continued, her tone now a little sharper. "People do it. Happy couples do it. I want to explore together. That's all." Her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced down, almost instinctively, then caught herself. Her thumb hovered like she was about to swipe the notification away. But she didn't. Maybe she thought ignoring it would seem more innocent. It gave me just enough time to see the name on the screen. "Derek." "Who's Derek?" I asked, my voice level. Her eyes flickered, just for a split second, before she smiled again, lighter this time. "He's just a gym buddy. You know, one of the trainers there. We talk about workouts." I tilted my head slightly. "He texts you on Saturday nights?" She gave a small laugh, but it was brittle, the kind that breaks if you press too hard. "You're reading too much into everything. This is exactly why couples try open marriage, so there's no jealousy over harmless stuff." I let my gaze linger on her a little longer than usual. She shifted in her seat, tucking one leg under the other, eyes drifting toward the TV like she was trying to signal the conversation was over. "All right," I said at last, as if I was satisfied. "If you say so." Her shoulders loosened. She smiled faintly and went back to scrolling, though I noticed she angled the phone slightly away from me. For now, I let it drop. But in my head, the name Derek was etched in sharp ink. I didn't know exactly what role he played yet, but I knew it wasn't as innocent as she wanted me to believe. Later that night, she fell asleep quickly, the quiet rhythm of her breathing filling the dark. Her phone sat on the nightstand, screen still face down, the charging cord looped neatly. Twice, I heard the faint buzz of an incoming message. She didn't stir. I lay there, eyes open, my mind turning over the same thought again and again. She hadn't looked surprised when I asked the question. She'd looked prepared. That meant one thing. This wasn't a conversation that had caught her off guard. It was one she'd been rehearsing for. And that made me certain I was closer to the truth than she wanted me to be. If you want, I can now move into part 5, the discovery, where he finally gets undeniable evidence. That's where the story will shift from suspicion to absolute certainty. It happened 2 days after the conversation about Derek. I hadn't planned for it to happen then, but sometimes the opportunity you've been waiting for slips quietly into your hands. Claire was in the shower, steam curling from the slightly open bathroom door, her phone charging on the nightstand. That alone was unusual. She took it everywhere, even into the bathroom. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the black screen, feeling that now familiar push and pull in my chest. If I opened it, there was no going back. Then it buzzed once. A pause. Then again. I turned it over. The lock screen was plain. No smiling couple photo, no beach sunset. Just the same passcode we'd set years ago for convenience. She'd never changed it. My pulse pounded in my ears as I entered the numbers, each tap like a hammer on wood, sealing something final. Messages. The top conversation. Derek. I opened it, and any remaining part of me that wanted to believe her was gone in an instant. The most recent message from Derek read, "Same time tomorrow? I'll book the room." Above it, Claire had sent a photo I'd never seen before. It wasn't explicit, but it didn't need to be. It was intimate in a way that felt personal. Herself in soft lighting, hair down, the kind of smile that had once been mine. Her caption, "Can't wait to see you." I scrolled up. Lines of flirty banter scrolled past, each one another nail in the coffin. She complained about me, how I'd become boring, how she was trying to get me on board so they wouldn't have to sneak around anymore. Derek replied with a laughing emoji. I'll help convince him. Further up, I found dates, times, and references to the hotel near his work. Nights she'd claimed to be with Emily or working late. They'd joked about upgrading to a nicer place, once I agreed to an open marriage. Reading those messages, I could remember exactly where I'd been on those nights, sitting at home, trusting her. Somewhere between scrolling and breathing, the tremor in my hand stopped. The sting of betrayal was still there, but it was cooling into something sharper, clarity. This wasn't a hunch anymore. It wasn't a series of suspicious coincidences. It was fact. Undeniable, documented fact. I pulled out my phone and took photos of everything. Every message, every emoji, every picture. I emailed them to myself, not because I wanted to blast them around, but because I wanted to make sure I could never be gaslit into doubting my own memory later. When I was done, I set her phone back exactly how it had been. Screen face down. Charging cord looped neatly. A few minutes later, she stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, smelling of lavender shampoo. She smiled like we were any other married couple on any other evening. "Hey," she said casually, "want me to make tea?" "Sure," I said, my voice even. We sat on the couch, mugs in hand, the TV flickering in front of us. We chatted about nothing, the weather, a sale at the grocery store, what we might do next weekend. On the outside, I was relaxed. Inside, I was already dismantling the life we'd built together, piece by piece. That night, as she drifted off beside me, her breathing slow and even, I lay awake mapping it all out. What I would say? The exact moment I'd say it. How I would make sure she understood there was no room for negotiation. She thought she was guiding this situation, easing me toward an agreement. She had no idea she'd just handed me every card in the deck. By the time I closed my eyes, there was no anger, no hurt, just focus. The last trace of hope for her innocence was gone. Now there was only the plan. Once I had the proof, the only thing left was execution. I didn't want shouting or a messy back and forth. I wanted a clean, decisive ending where every word hit with precision. If she was going to leave, she was going to leave knowing exactly why, and there would be no space left for her to twist the story later. 2 nights after I went through her phone, the moment came on its own. She came home around 7, dressed in a fitted cream sweater, dark jeans, and ankle boots. Her makeup still perfect, her hair as smooth as if she'd just stepped out of a salon. She hung her coat neatly, came into the living room, and sat across from me like nothing was wrong. "So," she said, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp. "Have you thought more about the open marriage thing? I feel like we should make a decision soon." I set my coffee cup down and met her gaze. I have made a decision. A flicker of anticipation crossed her face before she could hide it. Yeah. Yes, I said. You have 30 minutes to pack your things and leave my house. The look on her face shifted in an instant. First surprise, then disbelief, then the beginnings of anger. What? You heard me, I said, calm and clear. 30 minutes. Whatever you want to take, you take now. She gave a short, sharp laugh. You're joking. No, I said. And before you ask, this isn't about open marriage. This is about Derek. The hotel. The pictures. The messages you thought I'd never see. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. Then, you went through my phone. I found the truth, I said, still calm. And I'm done. You've got 28 minutes now. Her expression hardened. You're pathetic. Invading my privacy because you can't handle a real conversation. I didn't respond. I just leaned back in my chair and let her words hit the air and fall flat. She spun on her heel and stormed into the bedroom. Drawers slammed. The closet door banged open. Clothes hit the suitcase with the dull thud of resignation. She kept her voice raised, hurling insults, claiming I was overreacting, telling me I'd never find someone as exciting as her. I didn't move. The sound of hangers scraping along the closet rod mixed with the metallic zip of the suitcase being forced shut. Each noise felt like a second ticking away on the clock in my head. She came back into the living room, suitcase half-zipped, her face flushed and her breathing uneven. She yanked her purse from the hook by the door, pulled out her phone, and began typing furiously. I didn't need to guess who she was messaging. 18 minutes, I said quietly. She froze for a moment, glaring at me like she wanted me to flinch. When I didn't, she turned her focus back to her screen, thumbs flying. Exactly at the 29th minute, headlights swept across the living room wall. A black car slowed and pulled into the driveway. I stood up and walked to the door before she could. When I opened it, he was halfway up the path. Derek looked just like his pictures, taller than me, broad-shouldered, trying to project confidence, though I could see uncertainty already creeping in. Right on time, I said, stepping aside. She's all yours. His eyes flicked from me to the suitcase beside the door, then to Claire, who appeared in the hallway. He began, clearly unsure of the scene he'd just walked into. I reached into my pocket, pulled out her wedding ring, and tossed it into the yard. It landed in the grass with a faint metallic clink. Her eyes widened, not just at the gesture, but at the finality in it. The neighbor's curtains shifted on both sides of the street. Someone was watching. Without a word, she grabbed the suitcase handle and walked past me, her boots crunching on the driveway. Derek hesitated, bent down to pick up the ring, then followed her to the car. I closed the door slowly, listening to the engine start, the tires crunch on gravel, and the sound fading into the night until there was nothing left but silence. And it was the cleanest silence I'd heard in weeks. The sound of the car door closing should have been the end of it, but endings rarely come that neatly. Through the window, I saw her pause beside the passenger door, saying something to Derek. Her suitcase handle was clutched tight in one hand, her voice low but animated. Derek stood there, hands in his pockets, shifting his weight like a man who'd shown up expecting a secret rendezvous and instead walked into the last act of a play he didn't audition for. The neighborhood was watching. Across the street, Mrs. Palmer stood in her living room, angled just far enough back from the window to pretend she wasn't staring. The curtains next door moved ever so slightly, the faint silhouette of Mr. Graves frozen behind them. They weren't going to miss this. I stepped out onto the porch, leaning casually against the railing. Problem, I called out, my voice carrying in the crisp night air. Claire turned sharply, her tone clipped. No problem. But Derek didn't move toward the driver's seat. He glanced between us, eyes narrowing like he was trying to piece together a story from scraps. She tell you why she's moving out? I asked him, my voice steady. Claire shot me a glare that could have cut glass. Don't. Derek gave a half shrug. She, said you two were having problems. I smiled, though there was nothing friendly in it. That's one way to put it. Another way is, she's been sneaking around with you while telling me we should open our marriage. His eyebrows twitched upward. His stance shifted, weight falling back onto his heels. He glanced at Claire, who looked momentarily caught off guard, like she'd expected me to keep quiet about the details. The street was holding its breath. I walked to the edge of the porch. And here's the thing. Derek, You can have her. I'm not standing in your way. But you should know she was working on convincing me, so she wouldn't have to lie anymore. I guess she didn't think you were worth risking the marriage until I caught her." That landed. A faint flush crept up his neck. He opened his mouth, then closed it. "Look, man, I didn't. Save it," I said, my voice cutting through his hesitation. "She's packed. You're here. Take her and go." Claire snapped. "You're humiliating yourself." I let out a quiet laugh. "No, Claire. I'm making sure the truth is out in the open. You were counting on sneaking away with him like nothing happened. Not anymore." I stepped down 2 steps and pulled her wedding ring from my pocket. "Almost forgot," I said, tossing it toward her. It hit the driveway with a metallic ping, bounced once, and rolled into the grass. Her eyes locked on mine, burning with a mix of rage and something else, maybe fear. She didn't say a word. She just bent to grab the suitcase handle and walk toward the car. Derek hesitated, then picked the ring out of the grass. His expression was tense, his jaw set, but there was no victory in his face. If anything, he looked like a man realizing this was going to be a lot messier than he'd bargained for. He opened the trunk, lifted her suitcase in, and closed it with a dull thud. Claire climbed into the passenger seat without looking back at me. Derek got behind the wheel, glanced at me one last time, then turned the key. The engine's low rumble filled the night. The taillights cast a red glow on the street as they backed out of the driveway. Gravel crunched under the tires. When they turned the corner, the air seemed to loosen. Curtains shifted as neighbors retreated from their windows, the show over. I stayed on the porch a moment longer, looking at the empty space where the car had been. My hands were steady. My chest felt lighter than it had in weeks. When I went back inside, the quiet was different. Not just the absence of her voice, but the absence of constant doubt, suspicion, and the weight of pretending I didn't know. The silence didn't feel empty, it felt clean. I closed the door, locked it, and let it settle over me. The house felt different the second the door clicked shut behind me. Lighter somehow. The air didn't feel thick anymore, like the weight of suspicion and half-truths had been holding it in place for weeks. I stood in the hallway for a moment, just listening to the silence. No footsteps pacing from room to room. No muffled conversations from behind a closed bathroom door. No phone buzzing insistently in her hand while she claimed it was just a friend. That night, I slept without waking once. No restless tossing. No mind replaying her excuses on a loop. Just an unbroken stretch of sleep. And when I opened my eyes in the morning, the sun was spilling through the blinds in a way I hadn't noticed in months. Over the next few days, I adjusted to the quiet. The house stayed clean without effort. I could leave my phone on the counter without wondering if hers was lighting up across the room with someone else's name. The absence of her voice wasn't loneliness, it was space. Room to think. 2 days after she left, I got a message from an unknown number. When I opened it, I saw it was from a woman named Hannah. She introduced herself as Derek's girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend now, she clarified. She thanked me for laying everything out in the open and said she was leaving him. Her tone was oddly calm, almost relieved, like she'd been sitting on her own suspicions for a while. "I'm sorry it had to happen this way for both of us," she wrote. "But I'm glad to know I wasn't crazy. Good luck moving forward." I stared at that message for a long time. It felt like proof that this whole mess hadn't been one-sided. 2 people had been living under the weight of someone else's lies, and now both of us were free. The following weekend, I drove past the hotel Claire and Derek had used. I didn't stop, but as I passed it, I realized I didn't feel anger anymore. Just detachment. It was a place I'd never have to think about again. Friends started to hear pieces of the story. Some texted me asking if it was true. Others said they'd had a feeling. I didn't give them the play-by-play. I wasn't interested in reliving it for anyone's entertainment. All they needed to know was that it was over and I was fine. Better than fine. One night, I sat on the couch with a cup of coffee, looking around the living room. The same space where she'd sat and told me she wanted freedom and personal growth. The same space where I'd told her she had 30 minutes to leave. I realized then that she'd gotten exactly what she asked for. She just hadn't counted on her freedom meaning freedom from me. That thought didn't make me smile, exactly, but it settled in my chest like closure. When she wanted an open marriage, she didn't expect it to open the door to her own exit. And that was the truth I'd carry forward. Not the betrayal, not the humiliation, but the reminder that the moment you stop pretending, you get your life back.